This is going to be good. Hey, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 4. There's a cartoon or a comic figure that I watched growing up, and whenever someone would start provoking him, he would say, "Don't make me angry. You won't like me when I'm angry." Does anybody know who that is? It's the Hulk, and the Hulk smashed some things, right? How many of you know that not anyone in this church, but other churches I've heard that people can get angry, right? You know, anybody know angry people? Yeah. Anybody ever? Do not raise your hand. I guess just hang on to that for a moment. I think that when we look at the order of creation and you begin to see some things that happen as a result of the fall of man, when I go back to the beginning, and I may have said this in the weeks past, but when I went back to the book of Genesis years ago and started reading the Bible through from beginning to front in the order of it, instead of just reading it in its entirety at different parts, and going through Genesis, there was just so much richness that was there. And I think it's always good when you look at things to go back to the beginning and you see that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God gave order to it. It's so important to remember order. God spoke everything to existence, but when he got ready to make us, God knelt down and with his hands formed us out of the dust of the ground, and his fingerprints are all over our life. It's the image. He made us in his image. It's so beautiful how he did that. He gave man dominion over the birds of the air, the plants of the field. And then God saw that it was not good for man to be alone, and he gave to him woman, and he took from his side, his rib, and he created woman, and it's a helpmate to him. And God gave order to relationship, which April and I talked about last week. And the beautiful part is this, is that God creates and God gives order. But when God creates and God gives order, there's always going to be a counterfeit, and there's going to be a moment where the enemy slithers into that time and that moment to try and bring distraction and to bring disorder. If God is a God of order, then the enemy is the leader of distraction and disorder. And so he slithers in and he messes with the mind of Eve. So God had told Adam, don't eat, you can eat of any tree in the garden, but just don't eat of the tree, of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's what he said to him. Then he takes and he gives him a woman, and he tells the woman that we can eat of any tree. He passes it down to her. Now she is in the garden, and the enemy slithers up to her and says, "Did God really say?" And then she repeats and says to him, "Hey, you're going to have an opportunity to see that he doesn't want you to be like him." She says to the enemy that what God had said, but it wasn't exactly what God had said. It was a roundabout way. Now the distraction is taking over, and Adam passively stands by. She eats of the fruit, Adam partakes of the fruit, and we ain't been able to pick a place to eat since, right? It has been a battle, one of the biggest battles in marriage, basically. In any relationship. It's the easiest question with the hardest result, right? And you see the way that the enemy comes in, and then you see in Genesis chapter 3, you start seeing the order that is given because of the result of it. I remember when April and I were, April was pregnant, we were pregnant with our first child. I like to say we, but really she carried all the burden of that in that season. I remember us moving from Missouri, and the insurance coverage that we had covered an epidural. But when we went to Louisiana, the insurance that we had did not cover an epidural. It was going to be an extra $1,500. Now, we were as broke as the Ten Commandments. So we didn't have $1,500. And the thing of it is you couldn't wait till you got there to get the money. You had to make the payment early. And I'm struggling because we didn't have $1,500. I didn't know what we were going to do. And she's like, "Babe, we need to get that $1,500. And I was doing devotions in Genesis chapter 3. And Genesis chapter 3 says that the woman's desire will be for her husband. I'm like, let's go. And then it says, "And you will bring forth children in much pain." And I was like, there's why I don't need to spend $1,500. It is a part of what's going down. So I went to April. I was like, "Baby," I was reading the word. And you know, God gave order. And God has said that the way it's going to go is like, I'm going to work by the sweat of my brow. You know, I got a big head, big brow. It's going to sweat a lot. But, and you're supposed to have these children with a bunch of pain. And so basically she didn't say, "I don't care how biblical you think that is." She said, I'm thankful for the grace of an epidural, and you're going to figure out a way to get that money. And I will tell you that after our first child, I was very thankful for the grace of an epidural in that. Now, if you had all your children natural in a bathtub somewhere, then props to you. I know that you should get a trophy that no one gave you, but you should get one, because that is a biology lesson in and of itself. It is crazy, the pain. And I'm like, Eve, that's your fault. All these women suffer because of what? Wow. It's crazy. You see the order that is given, and then you see the result that happens out of the garden. There's basically, if you go back to Genesis, it's a 2,000-year family case study in human sin and God's blessing. And you get to see the first glimpse outside of the garden. And so you got to put yourself in the story and ask, like, how do I feel? Where would I fit? Which character would I be? And so I want to look at the fall of the family. Let's look at Genesis chapter 4. It says, now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, the reason it's important you understand that, because a lot of people will have an argument over what happens after this result. And I will tell you that what was their job was to multiply. Okay, now this deal with Cain and Abel didn't happen overnight. They grew up. They did what they were supposed to. And this opportunity presents itself to them. So when it says in the course of time, how long is that? We know long enough for them to be grown enough to know what was happening. And so Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. He brought an offering, right? He brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. Good job, Cain. And then verse 4 says, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. He brought an offering too. Good job, Abel. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. Was Abel looking at Cain's offering? No. Abel brought his offering to the Lord. Cain brought something because he knew it's what he was supposed to do, but he was looking at what his brother was given just to see if his was better than the one he brought. Cain is angry. Now this is a result. So this anger, did he know he was angry? If he doesn't know the emotions, and because of the fallen state of man, these are emotions that they didn't know they had, because now they've eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They're feeling emotions they've never felt before. So he is angry, it says. And his face fell. So the Lord said to him, why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? And if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. Another version says you must master this. See, it's anger. It's this whole moment that all of us experience in life. There's not any of you that have never experienced anger in your life, from the youngest person to the oldest person in this room. You possibly felt anger when you got up this morning. When you was about to leave your house, you might have gotten angry. You may have had an angry moment. Anger is something that we don't have to learn. We just got it. We get there passionately, and we get mad about things. We get upset about things. And God asked Cain, when he's angry and his face fell, you know what face fell? He's frowning, right? And look, the thing about it is it takes less muscles to smile. So as a Christian, you might want to think about that. He says, why are you angry? Anger is dangerous when it's not handled the right way. You can be angry and not sin. Jesus was angry and didn't sin. But there are times where anger becomes destructive. Many of you have experienced anger in relationship, or even anger that caused pain to your own body, or even destroyed. You may have seen anger, misplaced anger, destroy churches and great organizations when not handled in a godly way. So Cain isn't handling anger in a godly way, so you know what happens next. God looks upon Abel's sacrifice with favor. Cain is jealous. And in this moment, God steps in to intercept what's going to happen, to give Cain the opportunity, because that's who God is. God steps into the moments of our life and gives us a way of escape so we can make it right with Him, and we don't have to face the consequences of the bad thoughts that we're having. We get to experience the great escape of His grace, and gives us an opportunity to not function in that thought that has taken place. And it is something that you think. God asked the question, why are you angry? Look, anytime God wants us to learn a lesson, he asks the question. He didn't ask the question because he doesn't know the answer. He wants you to understand the answer. Why are you angry? He didn't want to tell God, but he knows exactly why he's angry. God already knows why he's angry, but Cain doesn't even realize he's angry. And God steps into this moment when he's tempted, and he says, you need to master this thing. So God steps into the middle of this moment with Cain and Abel. And God speaks to Cain. God speaks to Cain and says, you got to get a hold of this. Sin's crouching at the door. If you do not get rid of this, if you do not deal with this. That's why many people say, I want to hear God's voice. No, you want to hear God tell you something you like. You don't want to hear God correct where you are. God will speak to you. When God spoke to me in the second story of a 2-bedroom flat apartment, it wasn't, hey, Johnny, great and mighty things I want to do, things you know not of. It was get your junk together. Get your heart right with me. It wasn't, oh, Johnny, I want to bless you in mighty ways. Oh, you don't have to be married to live. He didn't do all that junk because that's not what God says. God is more interested in the health of your soul than he is with you being happy. Cain says, well, Lord, thank you for interrupting me in my thought process, but glad you did that. No, he doesn't. He doesn't say. It says Cain, from that moment, verse 8, next verse says, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? Again, he's asking a question. And here's what Cain's response was. I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Can I tell you, the voice of the innocent, the blood of the innocent always has a voice. He said, and now you're cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. And when you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Now, it's important to remember, right? He is a farmer. Abel was a rancher. Eve has 2 sons. Number 1 son, Cain, becomes a murderer. Number 2 becomes the murdered. Didn't get to raise a family and go on to spread the goodness of who he is there. Adam and Eve knew no sin nature, but because of the deceitfulness of the enemy, now they have tasted of the fruit and they have discovered all of these broken moments that they could have been protected from. And now, because of their decision, now their descendants, the fallen man, Cain and Abel, the descendants get to know the first one born. Cain has this law in his heart. They have the law in their heart because they're bringing an offering. These are the things of the natural order. You want to bring an offering to the Lord. And this offering that is being brought, did they both bring an offering? Absolutely. They both had jobs, right? Cain was a farmer and Abel was a rancher. They both came into God's presence. You know how you come into God's presence? With worship. That's why giving, when you give, it should be an act of worship. They both had hands. They both had offerings. Neither one of them came empty-handed. Neither one of them came with nothing. They both came with something. But one was favorable, and the other one the Lord didn't receive. Abel looked up to God in his offering. Cain looked at his brother's offering. There's only 2 kinds of worshipers, y'all. There's those who worship and those who are critical of those who are. That's why I'm always puzzled when someone's like, I don't know why you got to live. Don't lift your hands. Don't be mad because somebody else did. If somebody kneels, don't be mad because you won't kneel. If you look at Jesus, you stop watching people, and it'd be amazing what God might just do in your life if you stop looking at everybody else. Now, that's free. That's not even in the notes. That's just to slap somebody in the head today. You think you know what worship is? You probably don't even give faithfully. And the Lord's looking at what you're doing, and you think, oh, well, I'm going to look good because you want to impress. Cain wanted to impress everybody else. Cain wanted he wanted his brother to be impressed by, wanted his parents to be impressed, but God wasn't impressed with what he brought because what he brought wasn't what God asked of him. He asked for his first fruits. It's a heart issue. See, Hebrews 11, verse 4 says, by faith Abel offered. a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, though which he was commanded as righteous. God commended them by accepting his gifts through his faith. 1 John 3 says, we should not be like Cain, who was the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers, that the world hates you. I don't give everything I give to Jesus for the world to love me. I'm not looking for your acceptance or your approval. Because if I live for that, I will die when I don't have it. But if I have the approval and the acceptance and the affirmation of my Father in heaven, then I don't look for your pat on the back. I'm not saying that it bothers me that you do. I'm just saying I can't live for that because that makes me addicted to approval. Cain's addicted to approval. He wants to look better. He wants to look good. He still brought something, but God didn't receive what he brought. And jealousy and the bitterness and the envy gets this anger in him. This anger rises up in him and his face falls. And what's the difference between the offerings? Well, look at it this way. If Abel is a rancher, he has a herd of stock. He takes a portion of his stock and gives the best, his prize, and the fatted one. And he gives that first fruit to the Lord, and the Lord receives that because he knows that he held nothing back and said, I'm going to give you the best. But if the other one being a farmer, Cain, it would be like if he had a quart of apples, and he looked through the quart of apples and said, well, this one over here is bruised, it's probably got worms in it. Let's give that one to the Lord. That's why one was favorable and one was rejected, because God sees all and he knows all. And he asked the introspective question, just like he asked Adam from a fatherly voice, Adam, where are you? He asked him, he said, Cain, why are you angry? And he warned him. He warned him. And you know, Cain looked at Abel, but Abel looked at God. Cain looked at what Abel gave, and he was jealous of it. And then he had premeditated murder. And then he mocked God. Cain did. He ignored the pain. He ignored the pain that it would cause. He ignored the pain of his future consequences for what he did. And it's just like that today. So many times we do things after we've thought about it, and we carry through with the actions. We didn't think for a second how it's going to affect the family, how it's going to affect the holidays, how it's going to affect everybody. We don't think, because all we care is, am I going to be happy? Am I going to get what I want? It's a mockery of what God has desired for your life. And I think there are times where we'd have to say there are times we're probably like Abel, and there are times we're probably all like Cain. See, the difference is it's not enough to be in God's presence. God's presence must be in you. They both came into God's presence, but one of them had the presence of God in them. The other one was just there out of ritual. You know who else was like that? Satan. Satan was in the presence of God, but God's presence was never in him. Instead of wanting to worship God, he wanted to be like God, which is the very reason that the relationship should have stayed the same through Adam and Eve. You start looking and going, hey, what are the things about Cain's life that you can learn that you don't have to worry about? Well, you just take that principle, you won't like me when I'm angry. There's none of us who are like we should be when we're angry in the wrong way. You won't like me when I'm angry. Cain's anger killed. Why? Because he had this anger of comparison. See, one of the things that makes you the most angry is when you compare yourself to somebody else. See, the devil loves to get you thinking about everybody else. And God's saying it's not about Abel. Cain, it's about you. And what happens is, if we're not careful, we get into the looking at everybody else contest, and it's a bad game to play. Because it's a scoreboard. And as long as you're winning, you think you're good. But when you're losing, you want to blame everybody else and hurt someone. Abel didn't make his life the scoreboard side of it. Abel wasn't given his offering to try and show up Cain, because the offering was between the Lord and the individual. He got this comparison thing. Look, my self-worth is not dependent, 1 ounce of it, on your acceptance of me. I mean, It's why the American gospel has become what it's become, because we'd rather be liked than we would tell the truth. And the reason that the church has become the condition, and they're fighting, and they can't even decide how God made us and how marriage is supposed to be, and the reason all those battles are happening is because it's like, well, I don't want anybody to be mad. Well, look, the way you create anger, the way that you create strife is not allow people to bring their best. You start looking at well, I don't want anybody to be upset. If you will live the life God's called you to with 100% commitment to Him, I promise you'll stop looking at everybody else and you'll look up from where your help comes from. You'll stop comparing your moment in life to somebody else's. Like let me just, we all understand this, right? What we drive and where we live does not make any difference to the Lord. Right? But we will choose a lot in life and social ramifications based on that. That's why James said you shouldn't do that in the church. You don't play favorites that way. Why? Because it's worldly. It's not what godly people do. This comparison thing that happens, you start, well, they're such a great mom and I'm such a terrible mom. No, being a mother is difficult. So how do you know? Because I married one. She wear herself out about all kinds of silly stuff. I'm like, why are you sweating over that? Everybody crazy. Just the same way that I cried myself to sleep when we were first married because all these other guys are doing all these things, and here I'm like, she just picked terrible in life. Can I tell you, it doesn't matter. I was looking the wrong way. I needed to look up instead of looking out. When you start looking out, you start getting your lens all jacked up. Well, I got to do this. And all it becomes is one big game of whose lunch table you going to sit at. Well, we're not kids. Yeah, I see people risk everything they got just to try to fit in a table they never were called to sit at. There's nothing wrong with you. Listen to, if God blesses you, that's great. But don't define your relationship with Jesus by the material things that you have. I'm a firm believer that if God can get it through you, He'll get it to you. But if you're stingy and nasty, the last thing you need is more. It'll make you more of a jerk than you already are. The comparison thing, it brings anger. You always feel like, and then he had to deal with the acceptance issue. And it really wasn't acceptance, it was a lack of acceptance because God would not accept his offering. Therefore, He didn't give him favor. And there are times when we will want the favor that is on somebody else's life, and God is saying, I've got favor for you. Stop seeking their favor and seek the favor I have for you. The rejection that Cain had a root. It was a root based in the rejection of God's best in his life. Look, there are times that anger produces isolation. Listen to me, if you don't have people, first of all, if you're not talking to Jesus about the things you're upset about, then you need to stop running your mouth and talk to Him first. You need to talk to Jesus first. Then if you have some trusted friends that love Jesus that'll tell you you're being silly, you need to have those people around you. There are times when I don't call people that are just going to tell me and give me an excuse for me to act a fool the way I already been acting. I need somebody to say, you're being dumb. Well, I got to go, right? It's important. It's why you need small groups. It's important to talk about your issues, that you're going with people that will give you some good guidance, because if you don't talk to the Lord and you don't talk to somebody, you know who you'll start talking to? Yourself. And there ain't a more dangerous person for you to talk to than yourself. Right? How's that conversation going? You start I can remember back to when I went to church on a Wednesday night for the first time. April was with my mom. And my mom likes to go to Walmart on the regular. Now, she may not buy anything when she's there. She just got to go. And she's on no timetable. Lord bless her. There's nothing wrong with it. She's on her own timetable when it comes to those things. And she got all day to get there and nowhere to go type thing. And so it was in there, and this is back before cell phones were so readily available to everyone, not like today. So she had like one of those bag phones or one of the bigger phones that you carry, but we couldn't. It was back when you used to have to get a credit check to get a cell phone. It's the craziest thing. And so I'm calling the phone, I'm like, April, we got to get to church. She's like, I'm with your mom. And I am mad. I'm like, well, I'm going to church because I'm going to go to church all over the Lord. I'm righteous, and you a dirty sinner in Walmart, and I'm going to go. Now, I wasn't saying all that. I was having a conversation with myself. And I drive to church. It's about an 18-minute, 20-minute drive. I get to church. I'm 5 minutes early. I walk in, and nobody talks to me, and I start talking to myself. They know who your dad is. Yep, they know the stuff he did in 88. Yep, they know you're a Jew. They're going to say you can't ever come back to church here once they found out who your dad. I mean, I'm having that conversation with myself. Bible study starts, it ends. We pray. They pray over us, and then we leave. And as I'm leaving, so people are like, oh, Johnny, man, sorry I didn't talk to you before we started. It's the worst day at work. I was like, oh, yeah, no, what are you talking about? And then I had this epiphany. Everybody else is not thinking about me. Well, that'll make somebody mad today. I can't go to church. Everybody's going to be judging me. People got their own issues. Stop talking to yourself. You are talking yourself out of things. You're talking yourself into pain. You're talking yourself into isolation. You're talking yourself into negativity. See, Abel was a good man, and the more Cain talked to himself, the angrier at Abel he got. And he convinced himself that Abel must be the devil himself, and he needed to rid the earth of him. Here was a man who gave his best, and he was attacked and killed. Why? Abel was attacked and killed. Why? Because Cain isolated himself with corrupt thoughts and called good evil. That's why. Don't let anger root and fuel the decisions that you make in life. I'm telling you, it won't work. I can tell you this, and I didn't share this in any other services. April and I walked through a situation when we were serving under leadership, and leadership overstepped the boundaries into our personal life and tried to control it. And it was wrong. They had no right to do what they did. But here's what I knew. If we left in anger, we would carry that hurt into the next season. The way you end one is how you will start another. You ever seen someone leave somebody angry and they go into the next one and that one doesn't work out or they go into the next situation and they're angry all the time? Because the anger issue is a them issue. I had to take a moment and I had to pastor my wife and I had to lead my wife. Instead of just act, well, you ain't going to stay and do this, and No, okay. If you act wrong and you overstep boundaries, God will take care of you. Our job is to do what is right. That's part of bringing an offering. Bringing an offering not of division, but one of unity. It was an opportunity. It was a moment. It was something that had to take place. I'd have been justified if I acted a fool. Could have given a ton of excuses. And people say, well, you know what, you had a right. No, I've got a right. And the fallen nature of man, my right is to go to hell and burn there. But because of the grace of Jesus, I don't have to. So I need to stop living like the one headed the wrong direction and live in a place where I go, because you know what that is? It's exactly what God said to Cain. You must master this thing. You know what happens when you begin to master your thoughts, when you begin to take every thought captive, make it obedient to Christ? And when someone attacks you, instead of tearing them down. Now look, there will be moments that you're going to have an honest conversation with a close friend or something, and they're going to help you through it. But what you're not going to do is continue to do, because when you start and you go down that road, it only brings more isolation and separation. But what you can begin to do whenever you begin to take every thought captive, you master it, is you start saying, man, they must be really broken to want to hurt somebody that way for no reason. You begin to have empathy. You begin to say, wow, they're not against me. They're just for themselves. Because if they're not hurting me, they're going to move on to someone else and hurt them too. Because that's something in them. And then you start seeing, it's like I told you before in the last several weeks when someone says, well, you know, I've never had a friend longer than a year. Well, it might not be everybody else's issue. You need to deal with what's going on with you. And the offering that you bring. You take every thought captive. Cain slew Abel 1,000,000 times in his mind. And it's true in our lives. When sin comes knocking on the door, what do? You got to take it captive. Right? James tells us in James 1, verses 13 through 15, when tempted, no one should say, God has tempted me. Why? Because God cannot be tempted by evil. Right? And what God says, what the word says about it is, but when each one is tempted, when his own evil desires dragged him away and enticed him, that after that it conceives, it gives birth to sin, and sin what? When it's fully grown, gives birth to what? Death. But 1 Corinthians 10, Paul tells the church of Corinth, he says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man. We think we do live in an age of technology, but I can promise you this, every perversion, every wickedness, it's not new. It's been there since the slithering snake of the garden. There may be more advanced ways to get you there, maybe more advanced ways to trap you there, but this I can promise you. God gives you 1,000,000 opportunities in grace so the temptation doesn't have to take root and own you. Why? Because when temptation comes to you, God gives a way through Jesus Christ to escape it. That's why 1 John 3 says, don't be like Cain. Don't be like him. I believe God gives us grace to handle the inward battles that we're going through privately in grace before it causes public humiliation. Before you have to embarrass yourself. And when you lose that battle, you fail to be your brother's keeper. I love my wife, I love my family, and I love this church. But there are several reasons that I want to live a godly life. Number one, because of the rescue and the ransom that Jesus paid for me. He deserves my best, right? The other one is I don't ever want to have to look my wife and my kids in the face and tell them that God wasn't big enough to protect me from my own stupidity. I don't want to hurt them that way. Another thing is I don't want to look you in the face and say, I'm sorry, I'm just a man. And I am just a man, but I'm telling you, God gives us 1,000,000 opportunities to get control of the stupidity before it ever becomes an action. I feel like I am my brother's keeper. And being my brother's keeper doesn't mean I come with a finger of judgment. It means I come with a hand stretched up of responsibility. I mean, do you understand that it's a shame in the body of Christ that we can't celebrate each other's success? That we can't celebrate each other's victory? There's got to be jealousy. Oh, well, if my parents had done this, well, I'm sorry your parents didn't, but I'm thankful that their parents did. I mean, should I want my kids to feel bad that they don't have the same testimony as me? No, I thank God their testimony is different than mine. And we're not in competition. Man, if you're blessed, I thank God because you're blessed. If I'm blessed, you should thank God because I'm blessed. We shouldn't be mad about it. Because when God blesses the family, we all reap the benefit. I want to see God's family blessed. I want to see, not spoiled, I want to see God's family blessed, because blessed people are grateful, spoiled people are ungrateful. And listen to me, what we don't master, what you don't master in your life is going to carry on to the next generation. A lot of the things that you're mad about in your kids is just because you didn't master it. And you're mad, you're getting on to your kids for being just like you. And you know them pretty well. Master it. But the thing that I see, that's the clearest of all, is ultimately, if you give your best to God, you never end up there anyway. And everyone's best is different. And best has nothing to do with money, but just for the case and point of the sake of time this morning, I think it's an easy example. If someone this morning gave $50 and someone this morning gave $10, whose is the best? What if the person that gave 50 had 500 and the person that gave 10 had 20? Well, you know who sees that? God does. It's not a deal where, oh, well, that's... God is the one that looks at the heart of why you do what you do. People are easy to fool. People are easy to trick. People are, well, my heart's in the right place. Well, no, when your heart's in the right place, you'll be a blesser. Right? That's why you don't hear us talk a whole lot about about that kind of stuff anyway, but I can tell you this, the reason we don't is because you want to give your very best to God. And when you're giving your very best to God, things like that simply fall in line. Because if we had to take every Sunday and just teach you the basic things so you'll do it, but I'm telling you, if you fall in love with Jesus and you read his word, giving's not an issue. Serving's not an issue. Being faithful to church isn't an issue. Loving your family isn't an issue. But would you rather me just get up here and rant and rave about, oh, you need to do this, or amen, and the people that shout the loudest don't always hold the strongest truth, right? Noise don't mean, it doesn't equivocate maturity. Give your best. Before you move on in your life, you got to understand, God saw Cain and Abel's hearts, and he sees ours, and he knows if we're truly giving our best. I mean, isn't it crazy to think that we would run ourselves crazy for everything in the world and then give God a minute left over in our day and go, God, I hope you like that. I hope you feel honored that I gave you that today. And I'm not saying it's legalistic to where you need to spend as much time. I mean, what if you spend 8 hours of words? I mean, you got to pray 8 hours? It's not legalism in that way, but you want to know why the frustration you feel, the anger that you feel? Look, most of the time when someone's really upset and they're going through something and it's not pointed at me, they're like, I'm just mad. I'm like, hey, how much are you praying? Well, not. Basically, sometimes when people are mad, they'll say, I prayed about it, so you can't say anything about what the decision they made. It's just religious lingo. I'm talking about really pray about it. I'll ask them, how much of the word are you reading? Well, I mean, I know the word. I don't know how much are you in the word? Are you in the word? Because you can't expect that God's going to continually bless you when you are separating yourself in commitment. Well, it doesn't matter because it ain't about, oh, but he prepared good works for you to do. So stop living lazy and give your best. Give your best. We wouldn't do that in any other thing. I wouldn't show up to my job and go, man, I'm just going to give you the very worst I got, and you're going to pay me the best. But for some reason, we spiritually think we should treat Jesus like trash and trample him under our foot like it's no holy thing. It's dangerous. Bring your best. Every person, stand with me on your feet. You get an opportunity to bring your best. So let's bring our best. What is your best? If you don't know Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, your best is your life. You bring that first. And then what you find is after you've given your everything and you give your life, you repetitively bring it back to him. Lord, here's my best. There's nothing that I own that wasn't given to you by me, so I bless you with it because you blessed me with it. Take it's yours. It ain't mine. Do you really think you own your stuff? Talk to the bank about it. Don't pay your mortgage this month. Then stand in front of them. It's my house. No, it's their house. You're paying them for it. I own my house outright. Well, thank God that you do. And bless the Lord with it. Hosting a small group? I don't want little kids messing my stuff up. Well, your little kids mess my stuff up. Why are you mad? When you hold on to everything here so tightly, boy, it's hard to worship. When you say, God, everything I have is because of you, and in my heart I know I'm grateful. So Lord, I want to hold on to things loosely. Doesn't mean that God can't, it's not about not having anything. It's not about that. It's about saying, God, I want to be right where you want me to be in the season that I'm in, doing exactly what you want me to do. Every head bowed, every eye closed. Today, will you start with a simple recommitment of Jesus, I give you everything. Truly give him everything. Today, if you're struggling with anger, the Lord's knocking on the door of your soul. And he's saying, you must master this thing because your anger is being destructive. And that destructiveness tears down people and builds up walls. So today, Holy Spirit, place your hand on those moments. And then God, today may we be reminded to bring our very, very best to you. Lord, an offering of our life. So many times we want to fix the outside things instead of letting you fix the inside issue. Cain's issue was an inside issue before it was ever an outward issue. Today, Lord, may you be glorified in this moment. So today, with no one looking around, ask the simple question, whether you repeat it or say it out loud, or you just say it in your mind. Holy Spirit, what does this message have to do with me today? I believe we'll be better for bringing our best. I believe we'll be better for living our best, feeling the opportunity, not out of guilt, but out of life. That we choose from the right tree in the garden, not the wrong one. We choose from the one that produces fruit, not the one that produces poison. We choose from love, patience, gentleness, kindness, self-control. We choose the fruit of the Spirit instead of the poison of anger, jealousy, rage, resentment, strife, gossip. But we choose life today. Lord, for every teenager, Lord, when they begin to speak life over their brothers and sisters. Lord, for every adult in this room, may they begin to speak life. And then when an opportunity presents itself where it's not so favorable, Lord, may we turn the conversation with, they must be really hurting to want to hurt someone that way. God, our offering today, each person individual, even though we corporately give today, you see each individual. And Lord, today we just want you to have the very best. And Lord, you see and you know. So in this moment, have your way in each one of our lives. Have your way, Jesus.